Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. So here let's talk about a concept, not relating specifically to video games or YouTubing, but can certainly be applied to both. If there's one regret I have about my YouTube channel, it is that I didn't make these kinds of definition videos years ago. I just assumed that everyone was familiar with the concepts and terms that I was using, but the other day I was reading an article by one of my favorite authors, Umberto Eco, and he was talking about understanding and what it actually means. He said that some folks are very black and white on being for or against something, that it's all or nothing, and to say that one understands something is to support it. This has happened innumerable times on my channel, but I will dispassionately describe something and then people will immediately jump to the conclusion that I love that thing. So let's look at the different types or layers of understanding that Eco lays out, and in the future, this video will be helpful for me to point back to as I do more character and story analysis videos, especially for near games, so that we can decide to what level our understanding for different characters can go. But the 4 levels are to explain, understand, justify, and sympathize with. First is explain, but maybe describe is the better word. This is the what of the action or situation. This is to report on the facts, the reality. This kind of reporting is what newspapers and news TV programs do. If you have someone refusing to accept this, then you're dealing with someone who can't handle reality. Eco's translator chose explain for this layer, but I think maybe describe might be better because it's more kind of clinical and without bias. To explain, maybe some people could interpret that as giving excuses. The next layer is to understand. This is where understanding comes in. It's to show awareness of the actor's motivation or logic behind an action. Although the actor's motivation is often based on factors subjective to the individual, the reality is their motivation is their motivation, and knowing it can explain the why of the action or situation, regardless if we personally agree with the action or not. Okay, the third layer is to justify. This is to judge that the action or situation is acceptable by certain codes, laws, or values. Here we are entering interpretive territory, not just pure facts and reality. If something does not break the law, then we can say it is justifiable by law. If something is acceptable by certain codes of conduct or value systems, we can say it's justifiable there. The flexible part comes from the fact that different countries have different laws. Different cultures have different value systems. The important thing here is apply the correct and appropriate standard. A lot of people in the gaming community will judge a company's actions according to how they believe their friends and family should act in everyday life, but that is the wrong standard to apply in that situation. And then the final layer is to sympathize with. Here we have the completely interpretive, subjective level of understanding, to say that we personally agree with the action or situation, and that perhaps we would do the same thing in the same situation. Some people automatically attach this sympathy when other folks engage in the other levels of understanding, but it is not guaranteed. It is not one-to-one. Like when I talk about mobile game shutdowns, I am never rooting for any games to shut down. So to sum up, to explain and understand are to come to grips with the facts, the reality. To justify or sympathize are to make judgment calls, which will be different for different people. And let's apply those levels to something we are all familiar with to demonstrate how these work. But first, let's explain and describe a situation. In Japanese mobile games, the industry standard is that 3 10 shots costs around 10,000 yen or 80 USD. You grab a sample of any number of random Japanese mobile games with a hatcher from the last 5 years, and you'll find this to be true. Anyone who denies this is rejecting reality, and anyone who insists that the price should be lowered is ignoring history. Next, let's seek to understand why this is the situation. In the early days of mobile games, publishers were wondering at what price point to set their pulls, and one game, I forget which, randomly chose just 3 10 shots for 10,000 yen, and it worked. It was high enough that it could sustain the development costs and running costs of the game, but low enough that JP users would still spend. It was just below the pain point, a concept that says that consumers have a limit for how much they will tolerate of something before seeking a fix or seeking something else. 3 shots for 10,000 yen is below that pain point, which is why it has been the standard for about 10 years now. It's not going to change despite global users futilely saying for 10 years that it should. So you might be hearing me make these points and think that I support the business model of the Japanese mobile game industry, but we haven't gotten there yet. Listen closely to the language that I am using. We're still in the realm of presenting reality as it is. From here, we will get to passing judgment on the situation by current laws and values on the justify level, and then finally, personally judging the situation in the sympathize with level. So, can we justify the fact that 3 10-shots cost 10,000 yen? Yes, we can, and yes, we already have, although we in this situation is kind of more JP, Japanese users. The model is justifiable by law because it does not break the law, it does not cheat users. It's going right up to the edge, but it's not illegal. All pull rates are published in-game, and they are accurate, so users know what they're getting themselves into if they check beforehand, if they do at all. But if we look at another context, the country of Belgium, by their laws, this business model is illegal, so Japanese mobile games are not justifiable there. It has also been justified in the marketplace by the users, the JP users, because it's a successful, sustainable model and has been for a decade. But yes, when I say users, I really mean Japanese users. They spend way more than global users, and therefore have more say in driving the market. JP users, by voting with their wallets, taught the publishers that this is the price that will work for both sides. And so, if global folks are upset with the cost of these games, they should be getting angry at JP users, not the publishers or developers. It's easy to get angry at big faceless corporations, but this is how markets work. Businesses follow the consumer's needs and demands, and that is where the market has been, again, for a decade. Alright, final layer, we can ask ourselves, do we sympathize with the 10,000 yen price tag? For me personally, no, I do not. I've been saying this for years, but I wish the model would go away, because it can become potentially very expensive, and folks with trouble limiting their spending can be and are exploited. You might be asking, if I fundamentally dislike the business model, how can I play and cover the games? Just like with levels of understanding, I'm able to compartmentalize different aspects of the game, and I can enjoy one part of the game, and then that does not mean that I condone everything about it. I'm able to treat differently the good and the bad, and I can shine a light on what I think is uniquely interesting about the constantly updated mobile game, while not actively encouraging the spendy, gambly aspects. One purpose of differentiating these levels of understanding is so that when we run across something that is unjustifiable, or something we can't sympathize with, we need to be able to explain and understand it in order to fix it or do away with it. It's very difficult to solve a problem if we don't know what's causing it or even its true nature. Another purpose is to apply this framework to characters and stories to make them easier to understand. Each character of Nier Reincarnation is the center of their narrative, but how sympathetic are they? What kind of heroes are they? Hopefully I can show that in future videos. And finally, we can apply the framework to what I'm doing here on my YouTube channel. A lot of people have misinterpreted what I have said over the years because they take a black and white view on understanding, and when I address a topic, they immediately assume my sympathy when it might not actually be there. To look at the world in such an all-or-nothing way is not nuanced, realistic, or productive. Okay, a little bit different video than usual, but, I love language, I love precise language, and hopefully this explains a little bit what I'm doing here, and hopefully it'll be useful to point back to in the future. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.